What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's my final thoughts ahead of game week 1. For anyone new to the channel, I sometimes do this type of video close to the deadline. It's my most up-to-date thoughts about how my team is looking, what I'm thinking about doing with my transfers, obviously what I'm doing with my game week 1 squad in this case, and then answering a bunch of your questions as well. So I'm not saying everything is final. We'll have the deadline stream later on today. There might be another video or stream before that, who knows? But this is about as up-to-date as it's probably going to get. So we're going to go through my team first, then I'll answer a bunch of your questions. So this is how I've kind of woken up this morning. I'm recording this on Friday morning. This is the team that I'm currently on. So the one switch I made today was to swap Diaz and a £5 million defender. I think I had Walker, and I've switched them to Robertson and Bailey instead, and I've banked the 1 million. Now, I don't think that I will probably go into this game week, into game week 1, with 1 million in the bank. Yes, it could leave me flexible, but I think I would probably find ways to spend it. But in that kind of scenario, it is just almost like a straight up shot of who is better out of Robertson and Diaz, because I think Bailey will start the season unless Gerrard says something in his press conference that puts me off. And then even if he becomes a non-option later on, or the fixtures get more difficult, which they will around game week 4, 5 and 6, I've got Gabriel on the bench, the Arsenal defender, for 5 million, who could then come in and I'd then be in a 5-3-2. And with that 1 million in the bank, if I want to switch to an £8 million midfielder instead, then all I've got to do is sell Robertson and Bailey and switch back to a £5 million defender and then one of the £8 million midfielders. Now, I know one of the counter arguments to that will be, well, what if the £8 million midfielder changes in price? Well, what if they do? I've got the same issue if I start with an £8 million defender like Diaz, and then Saka or Foden or Mahrez goes up in price, then I've still got to make 2 transfers to make that work. And if I need to do it with Robertson, instead of going down to a £5 million defender, I can go down to a 4.5, and then I'd have the extra 0.5 to spend getting that £8 million midfielder. So I don't think I'm completely locking myself out of that move. In that scenario, it just comes down to a straight shootout between Robertson and Diaz. I've got to be honest, I'm still not 100% sure where I land on that. I have a feeling I might go back to the £8 million midfielder, but this is where I'm at right now. The other player that has left my draft is Perisic. Now, we're going to talk about him later on. I'm just a little bit worried about his minutes, but I'll discuss that more when we get to the Perisic discussion. In goal, I've still got Ward and Sanchez. That is definitely one place I could spend that 1 million. I guess the one thing in the back of my mind is if I spend it, it makes that Robertson to £8 million midfielder switch a little bit more difficult. So I might just stick with the cheaper goalkeepers, because that's how I usually start anyway, and just hope that it works well. I still like Edison, I still like Ramsdale, even Mendy's a pretty good option for Chelsea, but I think I am probably going to stick with Ward and Sanchez. In terms of kind of who's nailed on, I kind of put this together. Salah and Trent 100% locked. They have been pretty much since the game released. Jesus at this point is going to be on 100% lock as well. It just, even the ownership kind of scares me a little bit. I got to be honest. Like, some people hate the ownership conversation. Some people think that you should absolutely make decisions around it. I'm kind of somewhere in the middle. And to be honest, I don't have enough belief in the £8 million midfielders being so much better than Jesus to risk it. So he's pushing 75% ownership. It's mad. He's going to be 100% locked, I think, at this point. And then Cancelo, James, Martinelli and Ward, the £4 million goalkeeper. I don't see them changing, but you never know. Everyone else is kind of up for grabs. There's lots of players there like Neto, Bailey, £5 million defenders. They've been in a lot of my drafts. Andreas Pereira, to be fair, is 100% locked as well. But I could change them, okay? These are the only players that are pretty much locked or as close to locked as possible. And then when I just quickly do a little bit of tinkering with the team as well. So obviously, like I said, I could just switch Robertson and Bailey back to, probably would be to something like Kyle Walker. And then obviously an £8 million midfielder. I'm still on Diaz as my favourite option instead of tripling up on Arsenal. And I can't go triple attack in this one anyway, because I've got Gabriel as the £5 million defender. Spoiler alert, I think as a 5 million option, he's probably one of the best. Got a lot of questions about that. So I would put Diaz in, and then obviously it would revert to this kind of formation where I'd probably actually play Gabriel and bench Walker for the first week, and then it would still be that kind of 4-4-2. I could still switch to a 5 at the back. I'm not completely ruling it out, and I do feel a little bit less decided this year than I think I was probably this time last year, just because there's so many options. And obviously we're just trying to mostly fill our teams with Liverpool, Man City, Arsenal players, maybe some Chelsea, maybe some Spurs. But ultimately, I think it's going to be some kind of variation of this. I don't think I'm going to go for the 2 Leicester goalkeepers, but we will discuss them later on in the video. So that is how the team is looking right now. Is this one? This is the actual one I've probably properly got saved with the 1 million in the bank. It's just really that Robertson, Bailey, maybe Neto combination, and then one of the £5 million defenders. They are really the only 4 players I'm mostly tinkering with at the moment. Most of the other players are pretty much locked in. Pretty much, not 100% final. So just a quick note before we jump into all the questions. If you haven't already, please do consider subscribing to the channel. It's completely free to do so. If you've been watching all of my content throughout pre-season, there's a hell of a lot more to come through the season as well. I will be here every single week for 38 game weeks talking about my team, my transfer thoughts, captaincy thoughts, who you should be looking to bring in, who you should be looking to take out, and just general opinion. Loads of live streams as well. So make sure you hit that button. Would love to hit 300,000 by the deadline. It's been a hectic pre-season. I'm getting married in a couple of weeks. It's been crazy. So if you have enjoyed all the content, you want to see more this season, hit subscribe. Let's hit 300k soon. Okay, so what's my view on this Leicester goalkeeper thing? Should we be doubling up on them? Now, unfortunately, I cannot wait for all the press conferences to finish before I record this. So we will hear from Brendan Rodgers today. I'm pretty confident he's going to get asked about the goalkeeper situation, and I'm hopeful he'll give us a decent answer. He might say both goalkeepers are capable of being number 1. I haven't decided yet. That would be annoying. But if he does name the number 1 and he confirms that Ward is fit, then that is the goalkeeper that I would put in. Obviously, if he says it's Everson, I would put him in instead as the backup keeper, because you might as well have a £4 million keeper on your bench. In terms of doubling up on them, the only thing that worries me is whether they sign a new first-choice keeper to replace Schmeichel. And I know as soon as Schmeichel was kind of rumoured to be leaving or confirmed to be leaving, people were coming out saying Leicester are only looking at a third-choice keeper. They will choose Ward or Everson as the first choice. But there is slight risk because the transfer window is not closed. So for me, I am almost certain, not 100%, but almost certain not to go for it. I just think Leicester defence wasn't great last year. Yes, there should be some improvements if they can keep their defenders fit, but they're already being linked with moves away for Fofana to Chelsea. If that happens, that weakens the Leicester defence straight away. Obviously, they missed him for a lot of last season. So the fixtures aren't great. The defence wasn't great last year, and I'm not convinced there'll be a massive, massive improvement. It's great value, and you get that extra 0.5 to spend elsewhere, but I will probably be going with Sanchez instead and looking to rotate. And if I choose Ward and Everson ends up being number 1, I'll just play Sanchez most weeks anyway. It doesn't really bother me. So I see why people want to do it, and there could be massive reward for going for that risk. I just probably won't do it. Okay, so the Perisic conundrum. Is Perisic worth the risk against a weak Southampton side, or is it better to wait until game week 3 when he's had time to build fitness? Now, luckily, we have heard from Conte. He said it's normal that Ivan, after a serious injury, he is struggling a bit to come back in the best physical condition. Now, what is worth saying is nothing he said in this press conference was really news to us. We already knew that Perisic wasn't at peak fitness, right? We know that. He hasn't had a full pre-season. The first time he played over 60 minutes was that Roma game, the last pre-season game of the season. So none of this is really new. Honestly, I am surprised because he reduced his time to recover and we were really happy. That's good, although they obviously will be a bit wary about loading him too quickly. At the same time, we are not worried, but we have to pay a bit of attention to give him the right time to adapt himself to recover 100% from the injury. So it sounds like he's not necessarily completely recovered. That could just be phrasing. He might just mean that he's not at 100% peak fitness, like I said. He went on to say, we will see. We have another training session tomorrow. So this quote is from Thursday. Obviously, they're going to train on Friday ahead of the weekend game. I will play him or Sessegnon, right? So that hasn't really helped us, even though we already knew that was the case, that Perisic might miss out. I feel like this is a guy that's not at the fitness that Conte wants him at, right? He's still maybe recovering a little bit from the injury, and yet Conte still hasn't ruled him out from playing. So I think there's a chance, and if you're a little bit of a risk taker, I think it's probably worth going for, as was put in the question, because he is going to be so good for that 5.5 million price. And I think it's very clear that Perisic is the first choice left wing back. The only reason Sessegnon's even in with a shout of starting is because of Perisic's fitness. So if you want to go for it, if you're a little bit of a risk taker, I would do it. The one thing that I would bear in mind with him is, and this is kind of what's making me a little bit doubtful, okay? So when he last played under Conte, he didn't get as many minutes as he did last season when he played for Inter when Conte wasn't there. Maybe things have changed now, right? Maybe he was learning the position, etc. Maybe that played into it. But here's the slight issue for me. When midweek games start, especially when Europe starts as well, we might see a little bit of rotation. And interestingly, the first midweek game for Spurs is game week 5. So let's say there is some doubt about whether he'll start every single game when there's midweek games. He might miss this one, right? He also might miss game week 1. We know that's a slight risk. And then the second game is Chelsea away, so it's not even that good. So potentially, depending on how you look at it and how you want to frame it, 3 of the first 5 are potentially issues. Game week 1, will he start? We don't know for sure. Game week 2 is Chelsea away. I wouldn't expect a huge amount of points. And if he is going to start missing games during midweek, then game week 5 could also be an issue. Now, I don't know if that is 100% guaranteed. Conte might just keep playing him until there's issues there. But I think there are risks and doubts over him. So I can't tell you right now whether I'm definitely going to go for him. I do think, again, if you're a slightly risk-taking manager, he is probably worth it because 5.5 is such a good price point. And it's not like you're blowing 10 plus million on a risk, right? It's not like you're spending 9 million like on Darwin Núñez, who also might not start as well, unless Klopp says something in his press conference. So I think for 5.5 it's okay, especially if the rest of your team is not full of risky players in terms of minutes. I'm undecided. I've got to be honest, if I had to say it right now, I think I'm more likely to not go for him than I am to go for him. That was different a couple of days ago. Okay, so how important do I think it is to have at least one of the £8 million midfielders? To be honest with you, I don't think it's necessarily as important as everyone is trying to make out, but it could be handy as well. So to give you an example, let's say you start with one of the 3 on screen. It doesn't matter who it is. Let's just say it's Mason Mount. One thing that could happen, game week 1, West Ham. Okay, it's a tough fixture for Man City, but this is Man City we're talking about. They can definitely score a lot of goals. Let's say Foden or Mahrez start and they absolutely smash it. What are you going to be thinking? All right, well, they've just started. They've done really well. Very likely that they're going to start again. Not guaranteed because it's Pep Guardiola, but they could do. Who do they have in game week 2? Bournemouth. Happy days. I'm going to switch out Mason Mount to one of the Man City midfielders. I'm going to do it before price rises. I'm going to get in early and I'm just going to use one transfer. Everyone else without an £8 million midfielder is now scrambling on how they can get them in. They're going to have to take hits. So that kind of scenario could make it very handy. But as we've discussed a million times, as soon as those price rises start or the price changes start to move, so you lose value on one of your players or one of the £8 million mids go up, suddenly you're probably going to have to make 2 transfers as well. So like I said, for that team at the start, the one that I'm currently on, okay, I don't have an £8 million midfielder, but I can do it in 2 moves, just like anyone else will be able to as well. Pretty much anyway, unless you've really messed around with your squad structure, most people are going to be able to get there in 2 moves. Like if I give you my quick thoughts on the players, Saka I really like. I think he is probably the best. I said that in my £8 million ranking video when I went through all the midfielders. He probably is the best, but a lot of people have Jesus. A lot of people have got Martinelli. Some people have got Ramsdale. I've got a defender. And in that case, it seems like he's a little bit easier to kind of drop. Diaz is great. When Jota's out, he's going to get good minutes. But as soon as Jota's back, he could be an issue. Mason Mount, people are worried about Chelsea. Personally, I think apart from Spurs in game week 2, their opening 5 fixtures are really good. And he could be one that we don't talk about that does really well. Man City players, when they start, are always good. So there are lots of good options there. But like I say, it's not the be-all and end-all. There is a hell of a lot of good defenders. Gabriel Jesus is brilliant. All the premium attackers are good as well. So you don't have to have one. It could be important, especially if you're going to knee-jerk early. But you don't have to have one, right? So if you haven't got one and you're happy with your team, just leave it. Okay, so quite a few questions about who the best £5 million defenders are. I suspect a lot of this is because of Perisic, so people might be downgrading. At 5.5 million, I think we've only got like John Stones there and like some of the Chelsea defenders like Koulibaly, so there's not a huge amount of interest in that, which I completely get. I would probably, if I wasn't on Perisic and I didn't have the money to go up to like maybe even a Matip, by the way, because Konate's out at the start of the season, or possibly like a Diaz at Man City, I probably would downgrade as well. This is in somewhat of a rough order of who I think is the best, but it's not really completely accurate for reasons I'll go into, and I'll try and keep this as quick as possible. So I do think the out-and-out best option is probably Gabriel, but even he is not necessarily completely nailed. What if Arteta, when Tomiyasu is back, decides that Saliba and White are the best centre-back partnership, and then Gabriel kind of comes out of the squad? I don't think that's likely to happen for what it's worth. I feel like he probably is the most nailed centre-back, but it's not completely without risk, but I would say like I'm 95% confident he'll be fine. So because of their fixtures, because I kind of rate the Arsenal defence, because his goal threat is not bad either, and I do think he's somewhat nailed on, for me, he's probably the best. I've then put Kyle Walker. A lot of people have been asking for my opinion about him. Because they haven't signed a fullback, I think he looks pretty good to go for the first maybe 3 to 5 game weeks. I don't think, or at least they're not linked right now, with any fullbacks that I think would come straight into the side. So I think Cancelo and Walker will get a lot of starts. There is a slight issue that, you know, John Stones could play right back or Ake could play left back. Sometimes Pep does that for height reasons. We've seen that against teams like maybe Burnley in the past. I don't think there's too many teams early on where he's going to be massively worried about that. So I think up until European matches and midweek matches start, Walker should be pretty good. I don't think you should necessarily ditch Cancelo for Walker, but as a double up, I think that looks pretty good. I know at that point, if you've got Haaland as well, you are then blocking yourself from that third Man City spot. But if you're confident on Walker and the clean sheets, I don't think that's a bad option at all. I quite like Trippier. I'm still not as high on him as everyone else is. I still worry about the fact that he's got to play Man City and Liverpool in the first 5 game weeks. I'd really want to rotate him with someone else. And I know a lot of people are looking at Andreas Pereira. And if he starts off in a really attacking way and he's getting a few returns, that could be good. I don't know if it's the ideal solution, though. So with Trippier, I think if you can bench him in game week 3 and 5, then he might be okay. But if you're going to consistently just play him as your £5 million defender, I think there's better options like Walker, like Gabriel. Zinchenko might be better than Gabriel. Some Arsenal fans are pretty confident that if Tierney's not playing, he plays left back. If Tierney plays, Zinchenko goes straight into midfield. I would still find it very surprising if Zinchenko has moved without assurances that he's going to start. Like, why, apart from maybe money, why leave Man City's bench to go to Arsenal's bench, right? Maybe he just wants to go and live in London, who knows, and get paid a bit more. That could be the case. So I'm open to the fact that Zinchenko might be the best £5 million defender, might be better than Gabriel. But I think for a starting squad, if I want a bit more surety, I'm probably just going to start with Gabriel. Luka Dean's good. I think his attacking potential is really good. I personally think he might be better than Matt Cash, although Matt Cash may be more likely to get you a goal, and if he nicks one of them early on, happy days for those of you that stick with him. As I've spoken a lot before, I think Aston Villa's fixtures get bad pretty quick, so I think he's a bit of a short-term pick, so you could go for him and then look to move him on later. And again, possibly if it's a position you're holding on your bench, like I've got in my team, then maybe having Luka Dean coming off the bench with that attacking potential is not that bad. But that's why I've put him kind of 5th, just because of those early fixtures. Doherty would be top of this list if he was fit, but like Perisic, he is a doubt for game week 1. And the way that it's been talked about, I feel like Doherty is a little bit more of a risk than Perisic is. So I'm already a little bit worried about Perisic. I'm more worried about Doherty. If he was fit and definitely going to start game week 1, he would easily, by a distance I would say, be top of this list, because I really rate Spurs' defence and I love how attacking he is. And we saw last season he can get goals and assists when he gets minutes on the pitch. But those minutes from game week 1 are not assured. Then it's Chelsea in game week 2. So that's why he's bottom of the list. But I hate it. I really wish he was top. Okay, so I didn't touch on this too much with my team earlier because I knew it was going to come up again later. I currently prefer my draft that has 1 million in the bank. Is it important to spend the full budget, or should we at least leave 0.5 in the bank? Now, there's no real right or wrong answer here. There's lots of FPL managers that will be adamant that you should save 0.5. So when I was discussing earlier about the £8 million midfielders, let's say you're not 100% sure you want to make the move, or you want to wait for more information later on in the week, you can let the prices change because you know you've got that buffer in the bank to react. So it's not a bad thing, but obviously we want to spend the most amount of money as possible because that usually leads to the most amount of points. But it is an interesting question, because if I look at my draft at the beginning, right, let's say you're happy with Leon Bailey and then it is just a straight up shootout between Robertson and Diaz, and you think Robertson is better, let's say you're 100% sure about that, why not save that 1 million? Like, you could then go and put it, for example, I've got Sanchez, I could go and put it in Edison, but then if I need that money later on, I'm then going to have to make a goalkeeper transfer. And if I'm fairly confident that Ward and Sanchez is pretty good from the get-go anyway, maybe I do just save that money. So ultimately, I'm going to fence it a little bit here. I don't have a massive preference. I can tell you, I don't remember a single time in 10 plus years of playing where I've put money in the bank for game week 1 specifically. I can see how it can work and how it can be handy, but I've pretty much always spent 100 million. And I'd be very surprised if I don't do that with my current team. I think with my Robertson draft, maybe what I would do is go from Sanchez to Ramsdale and bank 0.5 million. But I'd only be doing that because I don't think there's 0.5 that I can better spend elsewhere unless I wanted to go up to Perisic. So ultimately, if you are genuinely happy and you don't think there's an upgrade you can make, for example, if I've got Martinelli and 0.5 in the bank, I'm not going to go to Rashford. I think Martinelli is just a better option for less money. So if that's the kind of scenario you're in, bank the money. Why not? It could help you later on in the first few weeks. But if you can spend the money and it is a big upgrade, you should just spend it from the get-go, in my opinion. So most top defenders last year would have come in the top 10 for midfielders and forwards. The fact they are 7.5 million or less surely means the 5-4-1 is the most effective formation. There's a couple of issues with the 5-4-1. First of all, you've got to have two 4.5 million forwards on your bench. Most of them are not going to get regular minutes and they're not always going to come off your bench. So if your first choice forward misses out, you've then potentially got no bench and you're down to 10 men. If you've got someone like Harry Kane or Gabriel Jesus or someone like that, it's not likely to affect you too often, but it's just something to think about. Ultimately, you only have one player on your bench, which is Andreas Pereira. People with 4 at the back formations or 3 at the back will have better benches. It might not matter, but that is just one thing to think about. Yes, a lot of the defenders will outscore their midfielders and forwards for the same price, maybe even higher price, but keep in mind you are not picking a squad for the season. You are picking it for maybe the first 4 to 6 weeks, then transfers start to happen. So to give you an example, will Trent Alexander-Arnold or Robertson or Cancelo beat someone like Saka or Diaz over the season? Quite possibly, yes, they will do that again. But Saka's got 2 newly promoted sides in the first 4 game weeks. Crystal Palace away, Leicester at home. Pretty good fixtures. Could Saka come out of the first 4 game weeks better than a defender? Yes, and he's absolutely nailed on. He also might be on penalties. So over a short period of time, some players can beat those players that we expect to score well over the season. Luis Diaz, will he get beaten by Robertson and Trent over the season? I would bet a lot of money that he probably will, because when all the players are fit for Liverpool, he will lose minutes, right? Jota will play, Nunez will play, Firmino will play, Diaz might come off the bench, but he's not always going to start. But right now, Jota's injured, and we expect Diaz to start maybe the first 3 to 4 weeks. So could he outscore Cancelo, Robertson and Trent? Yes, he could. And obviously, early wildcards are going to be a thing this year. We're going to make transfers. We're going to move our sides about. So this isn't me saying that 5-4-1 is bad, because it's absolutely not. You are right. All those defenders are great. That 5 at the back formation that everyone's going for this year in a 5-4-1 or a 5-3-2 look absolutely brilliant. But it's not the only way to play, and over short periods of time, which is what we're playing this year, especially with the early wildcard and the fact we got unlimited transfers in the World Cup, means that something else could work. Even a 3-4-3 or a 3-5-2 could outscore a 5 at the back over a short period of time. Okay, so is Rashford a good option for our Game Week 1 squads? I think when prices were released, people were a little bit surprised that he dropped that much, because he has been 8 to 9 million in the past and justified it. We know what he can do, even though he's had maybe 1 to 2 bad seasons. And I do think Ten Hag will get Man United playing better. Whether that's from the start, we'll have to wait and see, right? So at 6.5, he's a potentially good option. But as I kind of already suggested in one of the other questions, if it was him versus Martinelli, I'm taking the 0.5 and spending that elsewhere. And then if you think that a lot of people have got Salah, maybe you're looking at an £8 million midfielder. For most squads, I'm not sure how well Rashford fits in. I will say, if you're looking specifically at a 6.5 million midfielder, maybe you've got Martinelli and you have that much money to spend, I do think he's probably the best option. I think Sinisterra for Leeds is probably injured. Trossard could be okay. Brighton have got some pretty good fixtures, but I think in that case I would take a risk on Rashford. The one thing to say about Man United is there's a lot of work to do. Martial, him and Sancho had a pretty good understanding in pre-season, but word coming out, and we've not heard from Ten Hag at the time of recording, is Martial's going to miss Game Week 1, so he's already injured, and Sancho kind of missed, I think, 1 or 2 of the last pre-season games, so we're not even sure if he's going to start. So suddenly that front 3 that was starting to gel together has already been broken up. There's all this talk about Ronaldo. Is he going to stay? Is he going to go? He hasn't had a pre-season. We're not sure how Man United are going to line up in Game Week 1. In Game Week 3, they've got to play Liverpool away. So I think he's a good punt. I don't think he's a bad pick, but I'm just not sure I will be looking to go there. I've kind of ignored Man United players completely. I just think 6.5 is nice and cheap, but there's other players in and around that price that I think I prefer. And also, a lot of people think that with Ronaldo maybe not fit, and Martial injured, that Rashford will play up front. Two things with that. That's not guaranteed. But also, I don't think that necessarily makes him a better option. I think he's much better coming in off the left. So ultimately, I think he's definitely going to start. I think given how his pre-season went and given the injuries and that, it's pretty sure that he's going to start at least. It's not 100%, I guess, but I think he will. And Brighton at home, Brentford away, are not bad for the first two. But Liverpool at home is not great. Unless Ten Hag starts working a few miracles easy on, that ain't going to be an easy game. Not too many points. I think there's probably better options, but he's not a bad pick. So we're doing Kane and Haaland again, and I'm sure we're going to discuss them a lot on the deadline stream as well. Danny says, I still haven't decided on Kane or Haaland. What are your thoughts? First of all, there's about 5 million other FPL managers that are still thinking this over, right? So you're not alone, myself included. Like, if you notice when I talked about my team, I didn't put Haaland down as a 100 or a 99% lock because he could change to Kane in my team. I'm definitely not going to go to De Bruyne or Son. That's just structure and money reasons. But I'm not 100% certain about Haaland over Kane. So these are just some notes I put down. I looked at the first 6 game weeks because I don't think there's too much point looking beyond that right now. So Kane, 100% nailed. He's starting every single game no matter what, right? Maybe when fixture congestion gets to be a thing, he won't. But he always has, and I think that will continue. 80 to 90 minutes. Richarlison's there, not for game week 1, but he could take minutes off Son or Kulusevski or Kane coming off the bench. But I think Kane mostly gets to 80 to 90 minutes in a lot of matches, right? 100% on penalties. No one's getting them off him. He's got one tough fixture in the opening 6, which is Chelsea. I know people are really down about Chelsea, like they're just not going to be that great, not a great pre-season. I think they're going to be perfectly fine. Rudiger now becomes Koulibaly. They've got Sterling in as well. They're going to sign Cucurella, it looks like. They're probably going to sign a few other players as well. Maybe they won't all be involved by that match in game week 2, but I don't think Chelsea are suddenly pushovers. Harry Kane could, of course, get something in that game. He's that good, but it is a tough fixture, at least on paper. He's arguably the best captain in game week 3 for Wolves at home. I think Haaland's got Newcastle away and Salah plays Man United. I mean, given how Salah did against Man United last year, you could say he's the best captain. And I'm sure if Salah absolutely bangs in game week 1 and 2 and Man United aren't looking great, that people will think about that. But right now on paper, I would probably argue Kane looks the best option for game week 3. He plays 2 newly promoted sides, Nottingham Forest and Fulham. A lot of this stuff is similar for Haaland, but maybe not 100% certain. So I would say he's mostly nailed. I think the fact that Pep threw him straight in against Liverpool means he's going to start the season. Maybe when European matches come, maybe if he starts picking up a few knocks, he'll get rested as apparently he was promised rather than trying to play him through them. But right now, if he's fit, I think he starts. I think he's pretty much nailed, right? At least until European matches start and stuff like that. I don't know if his minutes are as assured as Kane, maybe 70 to 90, so he might get subbed off a little bit earlier than probably Kane would. Pens are not guaranteed. Pep got asked about penalties, and he talked about how Mahrez done pretty well last year. I think he had one bad penalty that he mentioned, but overall he did pretty well. It's worth noting that Haaland does have a better record. I'd be very surprised if Haaland is not on penalties, but it's not a guarantee like it is with Kane, right? So if they get one and Haaland and Mahrez are on the pitch, they might decide between themselves. I think Haaland gets them, but like I said, not guaranteed. I would say there's no tough fixtures. There's no Liverpool, no Man City, no Man United or anything like that. I know Man United is not as tough, but you get the point, right? They're not playing Spurs either. So I would say no out-and-out tough fixtures. He's arguably the best captain for game week 2, which is why I kind of like him. For that Bournemouth at home game. If you are someone that is thinking of captaining Salah for the first 2 weeks, Fulham away and Palace at home, then maybe you slightly ignore that Chelsea match for Kane and you just go for him the whole way through because you know what you're going to get, right? Premier League proven, all that stuff. You know he's nailed 80 to 90 minutes, 100% penalties. Maybe you just go for him. I think a lot of it depends on how you feel about game week 2. If you're going to get to that Bournemouth game and want to captain Haaland, maybe you just start with him, right? And then again, he's got 2 newly promoted sides. He plays Nottingham Forest, as does Kane, but he has Bournemouth instead of Fulham. To be honest, if you really want to pick apart small parts of this, Bournemouth might be slightly easier game than Fulham, right? We don't know that yet, possibly. But ultimately, they both play 2 newly promoted sides. So it's close, right? And I don't have a final answer for you. Right now I'm on Haaland, but Kane has been in my drafts quite a bit during pre-season, and it's basically having that absolutely known quantity. We know how he's going to play. We know how well he's going to do. We know that Conte is going to probably get them playing even better than they were last year. And outside that Chelsea game, there's not really any faults with Kane. So if you're on Kane right now and you're happy with it, stick with him. If you're on Haaland right now and you're happy with it, stick with him. If you're still not sure, flip a coin, because it is that close. Just some final thoughts to finish off, right? And if any of you tune into the deadline stream, you're going to realise I'm a massive hypocrite, because I will definitely be panicking and making last-minute changes, as I always do, because that's just the type of FPL manager I am. But ultimately, at this point, you have given your team a lot of thought. There shouldn't be massive overhauls to your squad. It should maybe just be like 1 to 3, maybe 1 to 4 players that you're not sure about the exact combination to go. So for me, for example, Robertson and Bailey could be Diaz and a £5 million defender. That's okay, right? That's just a decision that I've got to make before 6:30 UK time tonight. I'm not suddenly going to be thinking, okay, well, what if I don't go for Salah? I'm just not going to give that any thought. There's no point at this point. So you should be mostly locked in. Also, I'm not saying game week 1 doesn't matter, because of course it does, but most of us are going to have pretty good players. The real test starts from game week 2, right? Once that player you don't own absolutely smashes it, can you hold your nerve about the players that you've got in your team? Do you know the right and wrong time to make that early move, make that early transfer, go for that bandwagon? That's when the kind of edges start to appear, like when you start to either get ahead or fall behind. Game week 1 is not going to make necessarily as much difference, especially if you've got a lot of these template players. So try not to stress too much ahead of the deadline at this point. The real game will start in game week 2, and we have to start making transfers. We don't have, well, we do have a wild card to bail us out, but we're not going to have unlimited transfers every single week. So try not to panic too much. That's it from me for this video. There might be another video or stream before the deadline stream later, but this will likely be the last pre-recorded one. I'm not sure exactly when the deadline stream is going to start later on, but it will be at least 2 hours before the deadline, maybe even longer, because I think it's going to be a big one. So once again, if you have enjoyed the content, if you've enjoyed this video or you've enjoyed my content during pre-season, please do give this video a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new, and I will see you later for what is going to be a very fun deadline stream.